Welcome to Speak Like a CEO. What makes someone unforgettable?
Someone who is unforgettable is someone who is memorable in this crazy, distracted, busy world. Someone who, if their name is mentioned in a room and you're not there, people have something positive to say about you.
How do I become that person?
The main way is to focus on your presence. And that's what this whole book is about, is how to create an unforgettable presence. And the thing about presence in this day and age, especially, is that presence is not just about how are others perceiving me. It's not just about executive presence and being in that boardroom, but presence is really a lot more holistic. Hopefully that gets people more excited and feeling empowered. And that presence is really about those smaller moments. It's about taking the good work you're already doing and making small tweaks to up level all these different aspects that we interact with people on a day to day. So whether that is how you are leading a meeting, how you are presenting something, how you show up on LinkedIn, even how you show up on video, all these things are part of your presence. And so when we approach that with an intentionality and a strategic mindset, that's when we become unforgettable.
And it's important that those are aligned, right? If I pretend to be
Hmm.
one person on LinkedIn, but you meet me in real
Yep.
life, I'm completely different, or I'm different on a podcast, then you would probably think, I can't trust this person.
Exactly. And there's a story that comes to mind as you say that, in that I remember speaking to someone and she said, "Oh, I met this CEO in person. He was super impressive. I went to his LinkedIn. There was barely anything on it, missing profile picture, no information." Quite a disconnect. Like she was impressed initially and then maybe a little less impressed after seeing his LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, it's so important. We get to LinkedIn because you're an absolute
Yeah.
pro and you even worked for LinkedIn. You have a huge audience,
Yeah,
so I want to hear all about it. But first,
of
I'm really
course.
curious because you're a very sought after speaker and author
Mhm,
these days. But
mhm.
from your bio, it sounded like you were surprised by the fact.
I did not expect this to be my career path and what I'm doing now. So the story behind the book is, as you mentioned, I used to work at LinkedIn. So I was one of the founding editors there, which was a really special experience. I loved my time there. I got to work on really high priority projects. I worked really hard. My coworkers liked me. And you would think all these things on paper would lead to a promotion or would lead to additional advancement within the company. And what ended up happening was, as hard as I worked, as hard as I pushed, because I really did want to get promoted to that senior level, it unfortunately didn't happen for me. And so this book is really about, okay, how do you go from feeling overlooked, knowing you have all this potential, but it's unfulfilled, to truly being unforgettable? And it wasn't until I left LinkedIn where I really had this time to think to myself, reflect a lot, talk to mentors, talk to peers, and think, okay, what went wrong? And I realized presence was a huge piece of that, not having the right presence, not being proactive in my career and how others perceive me. And then a few months later, COVID happened. And then I realized, oh, okay, presence is not just about how others see us, but also the where piece was equally, if not sometimes more important. So I really came up with this magic formula at that point, realizing, okay, we don't always have to be in person to build a strong presence.
Interesting that you had to leave the company to maybe see it because probably the first ideas were maybe I just need a different business, different environment where I can grow and people appreciate me more. Maybe this has run its course, but it wasn't that. It was, as I said, at least in part presence or lack thereof.
Yeah, sometimes when you're in something, I mean, when you're pushing so hard and you have a goal in front of you, sometimes you do need a shakeup or you need that fresh perspective. But when you're in it, it can be hard to kind of
Mhm.
get that third party perspective. So that's why it
Yeah.
was helpful for me. Yeah.
Can you give us an example? What did you do at that point in time that you wouldn't do today anymore?
Well, yeah, a lot of things. A lot of it was around mindset. So an example is, okay, at LinkedIn, I worked super hard. Anything that anyone came to me for, they had needed help on something, I would say yes. And then afterwards, when I joined a company after that, I decided, okay, I need to be a lot more strategic. Yes, you need to work hard and do good work, but it's not about saying yes to everything. It's about being thoughtful. What is going to move the needle? How can I showcase that I'm being strategic versus just a workhorse and putting my head down and getting the work done?
Yeah, people put you in one of these buckets, right? Either newbie or a workhorse, worker bee, or a leader. And leaders are very strategic about the projects they take on, the priorities, and they think, well, what are the three things I need to achieve this year to make this a great year for me and the business?
Exactly. So I talk about, and we might talk more about this later, but a brand and how important a career brand is at work. And so my brand was probably hard worker, executed quickly, gets along well with others. And these are not bad adjectives, but these are not adjectives that describe a leader. So there was like that big disconnect in terms of, okay, I was performing well and doing great work, but if I want people to see me a certain way, instead those adjectives need to be something like strategic, maybe visionary, great cross-functional collaborator. So yeah, at different points in your career, you need to make sure that those adjectives are shifting depending on what your goals are.
Yeah, you mentioned career brands, so it's important to be really strategic about it, right? And maybe think about a
Mhm.
few adjectives that would describe my brand. Or what's your approach to career brands?
The first thing to keep in mind is that a brand is really important. A lot of us, we hear personal brand, career brand, and there's just a negative connotation. People think maybe, oh, I have to be marketing myself all the time, or I have to be really loud and just bragging about myself. But what a brand really is your reputation. And so when you think of it as your reputation, we all have a reputation, right? Whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether no one knows who we are at all, that's
Hmm.
still a reputation. And so we need to be intentional about our reputation. And so in the book, I call it a career brand to better explain, okay, the brand is in service of your career. So hopefully with that mindset, that helps us be more proactive. And to your point, it does take a little bit of thought, a little bit of proactivity. And so I came up with the EPIC career brand framework as a good first step for people to start thinking through their brand, because it can feel like a very overwhelming thing, like, where do I even start? So EPIC stands for experiences, personality, identity, and community. And so experiences, these are the personal and professional experiences that make you who you are today. Personality, introverted, extroverted, maybe you're more serious, the culture champion. What are these soft personality skills that make you you? Identity, what are your perhaps your cultural values, your cultural background, and what are the values that you operate by? So if someone knows that they're going to be working with you, what can they expect? And then the last piece, the C, a lot of people forget this. What is your community saying about you? Do they perceive you in the way that you think that you are being perceived? Because sometimes we might think, oh, I'm viewed as one way, I'm viewed as super strategic. And then you ask your colleagues and they're like, that's not a word that comes to mind, right? So there's sometimes that disconnect.
There is often that disconnect when it comes to brands, personal brands, and otherwise. And what I recommend is often to write down what the status quo is by asking people, getting
Yep.
feedback, and then contrast this with where you want to be. And then often how you bridge the two becomes obvious.
It's such a simple activity, and I also have those 2 columns in my book, and I teach how to build a brand to a lot of companies and teams, and it's so funny because either people will not really know how they're currently perceived, which is a good prompt to go out there and ask, or they'll maybe come up with a few adjectives, but then for the future state of being, oh, they know where they want to be, but they're not exactly sure where they are. So when you can, yeah, simply do that reflection exercise, take a few minutes, ask around friends, family, manager, peers, it will be very enlightening, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the tricky bits is the level of agreeableness or disagreeableness, right? Because when you start out and we learn this at school and university, and then you start out the most junior person on the team. And of course, you have to be somewhat agreeable because, you're there to help the others. But as you move up through the ranks, in a way, it doesn't help to be so agreeable. And the level of disagreeableness is actually serving you well and probably also serving the business well because you question things and trying to improve things, but you can't overdo it. If you're too disagreeable, that's also unhelpful.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fine balance for sure.
It's a fine balance. So how do we make a strong impression in person? We often in these situations where we meet new people in person, let's say at a meeting, potential clients, potential collaborators. How do we make a good impression?
I'm going to give 2 examples that are a little bit less conventional advice. So the most obvious one is like strong handshake, right? Like we don't want
Mhm.
the dead fish handshake, very uncomfortable to hold, does not feel like you're confident. But that's advice we hear a lot. So 2 things that I will share is one, in this day and age, we're all on our phones and we don't even realize sometimes like when someone's coming up to us to meet us or when we're with a friend, we are picking it up or we're looking at it right before we meet someone or as they're coming up to us. And the phone signals distraction. And so again, that microsecond or those few, very few seconds where someone's sort of forming that first impression when they see you, even if they're not talking to you yet, if they see you, they are forming that impression. we want to make sure that we are prepared, we are in the moment, and we are present. So I think putting the phone away is a big one. And then another less conventional one is a lot of us, when we are feeling a little bit uncomfortable and subconsciously we may be doing this, a lot of us will hold a laptop or a folder or something in front of us, and it becomes an additional barrier, again, subconsciously. So it's sort of, similar to like crossing our arms. So we want to keep our
Yep.
chest open. We don't want anything in front of us, and we want to, have that open body energy, body language.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great advice. And energy certainly plays a role as well, right? We are attracted to people who have great energy, but it's so hard to capture, right? How can I project energy?
There's a few different ways. So body language is certainly one, and hand gestures. So I talk about hand gestures a lot in the book. So whether you are virtual, whether you are in person, hands and body language and body movement, it helps a lot. And especially hands. On video, showing palms, there's been research that shows that you appear more trustworthy, yeah, woo, more energetic, more personable,
Yeah,
warmer, like all these really positive things. Certainly the
yeah,
case in person too, right? Helps with message recall, helps you just look more engaging, right? If you're sitting there and you're completely still, that's not as interesting to look at. So that can be one form of energy. Eye contact, right? That connection,
yes,
releasing that oxytocin, the social bonding hormone, that can be energy. The way that you modulate your voice and change the pitch and the pacing, that can be energy. So there's a lot of different things you can try. And the thing I would say about energy is that it does take practice. So if you are a more reserved person or you're not used to speaking in front of people, yeah, energy takes practice. Like when I started doing this keynote speaking, oh my gosh, after one, I would just be drained for the day, couldn't talk to anyone. Now I can do multiple in a day. So it's also a skill that you can work on and build.
it is absolutely a skill. And full disclosure, this isn't the first podcast I record today.
Yep.
And at like 5 minute break in between, which is fine for me
Yeah.
because I know how to regulate my energy. And I
Mhm.
look at this more from an athlete's perspective in the sense that, I think too many people think about work as a 12-hour grind or 8-hour grind each
Yeah.
day. And it's just constant churn. I would look at this as bursts of energy
I like that.
in the moments that matter,
Yeah.
and we can control our level of energy way more. Like, you enter a meeting, you show up online for virtual call, you enter a stage or you present, you have a
Yep.
podcast. That's where you really want to switch it on, and it needs to feel over the top for most people to be
Yes.
right, because our
Yep.
factory setting is relatively low. You
Yes.
and I talking in a small room, but a camera, a stage, a big meeting room, all of that is an energy filter.
Such a good point. You need to just be as extra as you can, and then that's like just right for the
Yeah,
audience.
exactly. It's just right for the audience. And how about virtual meetings? We said, okay, in person, great, makes a lot of sense, but most first impressions are now made online, right? How do we deal with those?
I talk about the T method in my book, so I have a lot of frameworks because I
I
like
love
getting just
frameworks.
yeah, really
Bring it
tactical and just
on.
yeah, yeah. So the T method, it stands for tech, energy, and aesthetics. And these are the three factors to think about when you are creating your video presence. Video can feel overwhelming because there's a lot that you can do to create a really fancy setup, but I don't think it's necessary, especially in sort of your everyday corporate meeting. So tech, you want to make sure you have a good webcam, right? A good microphone. You would ask me at the beginning of the call just to make sure I had selected the right one. So it does make a difference, right? Make sure you have the right software that you need. Energy again. So that's some of the things that I talked about before, as well as things like how do you start off a call and how do you create that nice engaging small talk. And then aesthetics. So how is the lighting? What are you wearing? Have you curated your entire environment? So not just the background, but there's a lot of technology that allows us to put something in the foreground now. So how are we really taking advantage of this, smallish space that we have to really make that strong impression and to create a really strong video presence?
What are the big mistakes you see people make?
The one of the biggest ones is framing.
Hmm.
And I'm still seeing this a lot where you have the head just like like kind of just right at above the bottom of the video screen. And so we're not seeing the rest of their body. And then the other person, it feels like they're looking down on you. And then when you're
Mm-mm.
only showing your head, in order to show your hands on camera, you have to lift them like here, which is
Hmm.
very strange. So you want to show a little bit of your body and real-time adjustments. You want to show a little bit of your body so that you can show your hands more naturally on camera. So that would be one.
Thanks for the reminder, by the
Yeah,
way. Absolutely right. I agree.
easy fix. And then another one that I see a lot is the lighting.
Hmm.
So you're in a dark room, you're backlit. I just did a few interviews recently because I just brought on my first full-time hire, which is very exciting. But some of the interviewees, now of course I'm going to be more attuned to it because this is my expertise and my passion. But some people were in dark rooms and they didn't have the best audio and it was cutting in and out. And even if they were super impressive on the resume, you're forming that impression that maybe they're not as professional or credible as you initially thought.
Yeah, absolutely right. And obviously, this is part of forming or growing your influence in an organization, right? We often speak to our colleagues, let's say, we work in a large organization or also clients, etc. So, how do I grow my influence, my presence in an organization?
Gonna throw another acronym at you. So I have one for almost every chapter. So how to build influence. So I talk about the RAVE model because sort of like presence, influence can feel like kind of like a nebulous term. It's like, you
Yep.
want it, you need it, but how do we get it? So influence, I break it down into relationships, appearances, visibility, and expertise. So these are the four key criteria to think about as you are building your influence. And then one thing to remember about influence is that if you are a leader, you need to have influence. To influence, you do not need to be a leader. I always have to think about that for a second. So that what that basically means is that anyone can have influence. You do not need to have the title.
Anyone can have influence. You don't have to have the title. How do I get influence then? Okay, I hear you.
Mhm.
Not related to the title. How can I increase it?
I'll give maybe a tip or two from that framework. So relationships, that's a really big one. That's very foundational. That's how everything gets done in business. And one of the things that's, and again, because we're so go, 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 and we have the meetings back to back, it is harder to take that time, especially virtually, to build those relationships. So one of my favorite tips to talk about is to use this concept called conversational threading and turn off autopilot small talk. So what that means is when we are passing someone in the hall, when we are jumping on a video call, instead of the typical, how are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm good too. End of conversation, which is autopilot, right? We don't even have to think about what we're saying. Instead, if someone asks how you are, change up your answer. Oh, I'm doing wonderfully. I just had the chance to go on my walk today, or I just listened to an interesting podcast, or I'm so excited to be talking with you, right? Even that breaks it up and brings some nice energy to the call. What conversational threading is you are asking questions that elicit more threads. And as the responder, you also give more threads. So what that might look like is instead of asking you, how was your weekend? I might say, what was the highlight of your weekend? And now you have to take a second and actually think about, and this happens all the time when I ask people, they're like, oh, let me take a second because I don't remember. Let me think through, oh, I did X, Y, and Z. Oh, great. Okay, now I can choose. Do I want to follow up with X, follow up with Y, follow up with Z? You've given me three threads to pull on. When you answer questions as well, again, being a little bit more thoughtful, giving the question asker something that they can pull on is also, I think, really appreciated. And that keeps the conversation going. And it doesn't need to be a 15-minute conversation, but a 1, 2 minute conversation. We're building rapport. Small talk is one of the best ways that we build relationships at work. And so, again, like presence is these smaller moments that we don't always necessarily think have an impact, but they do in the long run.
It's kind of funny, right? If you want to stand out on Instagram, say, that's super hard. If you want to stand out in a business, all it takes is probably to say, what was the highlight of your weekend? Because the bar's so low and everyone is on autopilot usually. So if you're a bit more creative and intentional about your conversations, let's not call it small talk, maybe call it mid talk or something.
Sure.
Right? Let's go with that. You immediately your presence will be felt. And I think this is such an opportunity that we are maybe not using to the fullest extent.
hmm I spoke to a team at Google a few months ago, and the person who was hosting was like, oh, I wish I read your book before because she had run into an executive who was in town, just, not there all the time. And instead she asked, oh, how was the meeting? And he said, it was good. Thanks. And then that's the impression you leave, right? But she wishes
Mhm.
now she had asked, oh, what was like the best part or what was the most interesting thing? And then he would have stopped to pause and think. And then maybe you have a little bit more of a conversation and he remembers you. a little bit more easily. So yeah, it's something, whether it's your peer, whether it's an executive, this works really well.
Yeah, that sort of pattern interrupt. And you were seen as some of those interesting things to share. So
Mhm.
people want to talk to you more. So it's not rocket science, right? It is foundational knowledge, yes, but very easily applied with just a few mindset shifts.
Like the theme of intentionality runs very strongly throughout the book, as you saw. So we need to be intentional with these moments, and again, yeah, not difficult, not hard. We can all do it.
Your book, and I would argue even communications as such, because we all can communicate because we're born with this ability and pick it up easily when we're small children. But that's where it often stops, right? It is not very intentional. And we've picked up these habits and these, just phrases, and everyone is doing it like that. And it's very easy to take on these cultural norms in an organization. But once we become more intentional about it, many things can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Very well said.
And in your case, you became a public speaker. So,
Mhm, yeah.
was there a breakthrough moment where a real big conference came to you and asked you to speak?
No, just like the book, not a big moment. What ended up happening was I worked at a company called Prezi after LinkedIn, and Prezi is a presentation company. And we were tasked with coming up with a goal for ourselves, a personal goal. Ideally, it ties to the business in some way. And so I thought, oh, okay, I work for a presentation company. At the same time, I had been seeing my colleague Spencer do a lot of speaking virtually. And I remember just being in awe of him and thought he was so well spoken, so confident. And I realized, oh, if you can do that well, like that does amazing things for your career and confidence too. And so Spencer thankfully offered to mentor me outside of his day job, give me feedback on recordings. And this was at the start of 2021. So a lot of virtual opportunities to speak. So my speaking career started kind of opposite, I guess, as most
Good
speakers.
timing.
Yeah, virtual first, in person later. But what ended up happening is I practiced, I kept putting myself out there, and then slowly but surely improved. And then realized, oh, I kind of like this. I think I'm pretty good at it. And then and then that led to things like becoming a LinkedIn learning instructor. So all of these things, again, they build on each other. And it wasn't my goal, but when you can be a powerful and strong public speaker, because it's a scary thing and because not everyone is willing to do it and put themselves out there, a lot of really positive things can come your way, whether externally or also internally, right? Like the CEO or other executive leaders ask me, oh, can you present at the all hands? Because they know I'm comfortable speaking.
Yeah. Did you have to build up your confidence, or did it
For
just come
sure.
naturally?
Yeah,
Mm.
no, for sure. There's, I get feedback at the end of every session. I remember one time early on, I forgot to unmute my microphone, and some guy was like kind of sassy about it in the comments. And, you just like experience that. You're just like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But, there's always going to be someone like that out there. And so in due time, it's really the practice and the repetition, doing the thing, knowing you're not going to die, everything's going to be okay. Even if you mess up, right? No one really knows as long as you're speaking with confidence. They don't know what the original thing was meant to be that you were going to say. So, yeah, it's definitely a skill, a muscle. But if me, a shy introvert can do it, anyone can do it with enough practice and support.
Was it just practice, or any other frameworks or tips, tricks that helped you overcome nervousness and build confidence?
What was the practice? It was having the support of Spencer and honestly, like that, talking about virtual and video presence, knowing that I was set up well, knowing
Hmm.
that I had the right framing and I knew that I looked good on camera and I had the right lighting, that makes a difference, knowing that you're showing up well. So maybe kind of an unexpected confidence booster, but it goes a long way when you're like, you turn on a light and you're like, whoa, I look a lot better on camera now. Like, I look professional. This is going to be good. I feel good about this.
Yeah, setting the scene is a big one. And you made a really important point about the person leaving a sassy comment there. You can't please everyone, and that's not the goal. Perfection isn't the goal, connection is. And if you connect with some people and provide useful information, valuable input to some people, that is all we can hope for. And that is, that's something we can usually achieve if we put our minds to it.
Always going to be some negative Nancy in the audience, but everyone else said great things. So to your point, like we're helping most people, there's going to be someone who's in a bad mood or whatever's going on, and we can't control that.
Yeah, exactly. And not everyone is everyone's vibe, and that's totally fine as well. So it's not personal and shouldn't be taken personally. So You're also building a massive audience on LinkedIn, 300,000 plus. You're a LinkedIn instructor. You worked at LinkedIn. So what's the secret sauce here?
I wish there was just a button we could all press because I get that
It's
question a
called
lot.
publish, right?
Yeah. So the biggest thing, okay, so first, like there's a mindset shift with LinkedIn in that LinkedIn is not just a job site. It's really a virtual landing page, a virtual water cooler, and what I like to call our ultimate virtual office. So we want to be seen at the office, right? We don't want to be the only person not there. And so LinkedIn is very powerful in that way to help you stay top of mind, to help you develop your point of view with a thought leadership. And it is a really big confidence builder. It's just something I didn't realize as I started reposting again on LinkedIn after a brief hiatus, that I found my voice on LinkedIn, and that translates to the confidence you have in an organization and also how people perceive you in an organization. So just want to call that out there. But to grow an audience on LinkedIn, consistency, it's not sexy, but it's really the main thing because LinkedIn does not give you that immediate dopamine boost that you are perhaps used to on a TikTok or an Instagram, for example. So it takes time. And a lot of people will give up really quickly saying, oh, this isn't working for me. They posted for 2 weeks and they're like, nothing's happening. This is embarrassing. I'm getting like 3 likes. But the consistency is key, right? You need to show people that you are delivering content, helpful content, interesting content, enough so that they will want to follow you, right? Just because you post once, why should someone, they don't know who you are, right? You need to like build up that trust, share your stories, create that connection, as you mentioned earlier. And that's going to be one of the best ways to do that. If posting is a little bit intimidating, which totally natural, many people feel this way, commenting is a great first step. Comments still equal content, as I like to say, and commenting can be very powerful to, again, hone your ideas, create connections with people. You will still grow a following this way, and it's a little bit lower stakes. So that would be, one of the first steps I would suggest.
Yeah, 100%. And I have this framework called PACE. P is the profile. So I think even if you're not, not there yet, you don't want to necessarily post yourself, have a great profile. Treat this as the prime real estate that it is. A is the audience. So be very mindful, understand the audience. What are their pain points? Don't go too niche because that is not going to get you anywhere on social media. Broad, yeah. First level is very broad. C stands for content. You want to, as I said, consistent content, providing value, and people look for people who help them solve their problems. So understand your audience, help solve their problems. And E is engagement, which is, yes, engage with the people who engage with you, but also engage with other people as they probably return the favor and you
Yeah,
can grow together.
we love that. Pace. That's a great one.
Thank you. But there's probably more to it, right?
Yeah.
So even if you post regularly, engage with other people, there's more to it.
Sure. I know a lot of people want to go viral on LinkedIn and to have a lot of engagement, but I think that's great. But I really think the power is in the people who you meet. We met through LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
You sent me a message. I was like, oh, and I go to your profile and I said, oh, this guy looks legit. Let me respond and see, what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
So building those connections, connecting with people you don't know, accept that request from a stranger. If they look interesting, you don't know what's going to come of it. I have met so many friends, so many clients through LinkedIn. So I think virality is great. Getting engagement on content is great, but it's really about that people connection and growing your network in that way and helping each other and just finding collaborators and friends. And so I think that's actually where a lot of the magic lies, where sometimes people forget about that because it is social media and they're like, oh my gosh, I just go viral and get all this engagement. But you want to make sure that you're connecting with the right people, that the right people are seeing your content as well. It's great to go viral, but if it's a bunch of random people who are never going to engage with your content again because maybe that was just like a one-hit wonder post, that's not going to be very helpful. But if it's a bunch of your ICP or a bunch of peers in your industry, that's going to be a lot more valuable.
Yeah, 100%. What would be 3 tips you could give to someone who's struggling with gaining traction with their content?
I'll give one tip for the comments is that aim for a comment that's at least 15 words in length. A lot of us will leave a very short comment. Oh, that's great. I agree. Or I agree in like one point. But that's not enough for someone to know what you're about. Like every point on your LinkedIn, you want someone to have a better understanding of who you are. So aim for 15 words. That can be really helpful. when you are writing a post, add a question, an easy question at the end for someone to answer so that they can engage. And you need this question in the first place because I've talked to people who say, oh, sometimes I see a post and I have an opinion on it, but I don't know the person. So I don't know if it's weird for me to chime in. If you add a question, people are going to realize, oh, okay, you actually you actually want to hear from me. So I think that's really helpful as well. And then the other thing I would say is that hook. So that first, 1 to 2 sentences on LinkedIn, you want it to be short, you want it to be snappy. It needs to be enticing enough. A test can be, okay, if I saw this in my feed, would I stop to click see more? So sometimes people, they get just too into a story or they just kind of want to share it all up front right away. But sometimes you have to be a little bit creative and just tease people to lead into it.
Yeah, that's right. Often it's too complicated, right? And it needs to be that just immediately obvious. We see more and more ChatGPT generated content though.
Sure.
What's your take on that?
I think ChatGPT is great for helping with ideas, helping to clean up content, but we can tell if you're just copy and pasting and not really filtering, like ChatGPT does not have your story. And so a lot of people say, well, what does this mean? It's going to be harder to stand out with all this content. Yes and no. Well, there's going to be more content on the platform, but then the content where you're actually sharing your human story, the challenges, the behind the scenes, ChatGPT does not have that. And so the better content is probably going to stand out more than all of the stuff that's very generic. And, I was on a podcast yesterday and someone was talking about, well, sometimes people will like copy and paste posts. And I sort of feel like, it's a similar idea with ChatGPT where, yeah, someone can copy a post, but they're not going to be able to deliver or replicate that. Like, that's not a strategy to copy from someone else. ChatGPT, similarly, like, if you're just taking from ChatGPT, that's only going to get you so far, right? When people want to bring you in to speak or interview on the podcast, if everything's AI generated and you haven't put your experience and stories behind it, you're not going to be very impressive when people finally do meet you in person.
Yeah, I so agree. And I think your unique voice will stand out even more the more AI takes over communication. So I'm totally with you. Which means also that videos like this, they have a big role to play, probably even bigger role. And I'm encouraged by YouTube, for instance, preventing people from monetizing obvious AI mass
Yeah, all
generated
that.
content. So I think that's a good move to keep these platforms relatively clean.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll have the dead internet is looming, which is AI and bots, and everyone's just, I'm not going to bother anymore. What do you take, what's your take on video on LinkedIn? Because that was very much pushed last year. Now it seems a bit tamer.
Still pushing it pretty hard from what I'm observing through emails and just, the whole ecosystem. I think it's a great thing to do to get comfortable on video. It might not be someone's first step, but worth experimenting. I think LinkedIn really likes day in the life videos. They really like, similarly with text posts, they like when you comment on something that's happening in the news. Or something, a career story, something, a challenge. So video is great. Not everyone is comfortable with it. That's okay. But I do think LinkedIn is leaning quite hard into video. So if you have not tried it yet, it might be worth experimenting.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it may not get the biggest reach at the moment, but it's good to take people on that journey, right? For people see you, build trust, learn more about you, see if if it's the right vibe, or if you want to maybe, reach out to this person. So I think for relationship building, it's great. Maybe not the most viral format at the moment.
So you do go viral. So you never know with LinkedIn, right?
You never know. That's right.
Try and just keep, again, consistent. So you don't worry so much about like the one post.
Exactly.
If you're consistent, you're like, okay, did that one, on to the next.
Exactly. Just learn and move on. Great. What's next for you?
My gosh. Well, I'm thinking about building out a masterclass and some courses connected to the book and my frameworks around unforgettable presence. So I'm really excited about that. So if anyone is interested, definitely follow me on LinkedIn or join my newsletter. I will be sure to make announcements there. And just more speaking, spreading the word about the book, hopefully helping as many people as I can so that they can, work smarter, not harder, and overcome or not have to even face some of the challenges that I did early on in my career. So yeah, really excited for that. And I think with a book, I hear, sometimes it opens a lot of doors and sometimes you don't even know what those doors are. So I'm staying open, staying flexible, and excited to see what continues to come my way.
That's the best thing about being more present out there in the world, right? All these beautiful people and opportunities come your way and reach out. And, sometimes just a wonderful thing that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So I'm very grateful for that as well. I know you are. What's your best piece of communications advice?
Best piece of communications advice. I'm going to share advice from one of the experts who I interviewed for the book. So I had the chance to interview nearly 3 dozen business experts, business leaders, C-suite executives, content creators, all types of people who have something to say about presence, which was very exciting. And one of those people who I interviewed was Kim Scott, who wrote Radical Candor. And she
Yes.
shared a framework in the book, or an idea in the book, around this email haiku. And a lot of people seem to be resonating with that. And so what an email haiku is basically being thoughtful enough to the person you're communicating with, in that whatever your message is should be able to fit on the screen of a smartphone without scrolling. And a lot of us, we're not thoughtful about our communication. Again, Slack, email, we're go, go, go. We're just shooting off the first thought that comes to mind. But when we take a second to pause, not even a second, maybe 20 minutes, right? Let's really pare this down to what this person needs to know. Now there's less miscommunication, there's less unnecessary back and forth, and you, the recipient of my message, sees that I'm a strong communicator, that I care about your time, that I respect your time. And so I would say that's one not super easy, but thoughtful way to communicate more effectively.
I so agree. That's such good advice. Thank you. Lorraine, I appreciate you. I appreciate that you're getting the word out about presence, about communications, about, what it takes and how it can help us as well, because this is a means to an end, right? And the end is, living a good life, having a successful career and working smart and potentially hard if you want to, but certainly smart
Yeah.
and making the most out of these opportunities. So thank you.
Of course, I'm so glad to be here with you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.